Yes, it's time now for the France 24 debate. After studying France's political landscape, Marine Le Pen taking center stage in Brussels this Wednesday. After her far-right National Front took one vote in 4 here in France in last Sunday's European elections, Le Pen, surrounded by like-minded Eurosceptics at a press conference, she says she's confident she'll be able to form a voting bloc. And even though it's not all smooth sailing, her smile in stark contrast to the long faces at Tuesday's dinner of EU leaders in Brussels. In France and the UK, ruling parties finished 3rd in Sunday's vote. And even though the centre-right and centre-left will still control the lion's share of seats in the next European Parliament, some are calling it an existential crisis for the EU. What's the agenda for Eurosceptics that range, well, everywhere from neo-Nazis to the far left? What do mainstream parties have to do to re-garner enthusiasm for a European project? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the Eurosceptic agenda. With us, he's re-elected. We can congratulate him. National Front member of the European Parliament, Bruno Gollnisch. Welcome back to the debate. Welcome from Brussels as well, member of the European Parliament, Philippe Lamberts of the Green Party. Also joining us, he's a political consultant and columnist, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, who writes for Le Plus, the Nouvel Observateur's interactive website. Yes. Nice to see you. Nice to see as well Mathieu Douaret of the polling institute Ipsos. Welcome back to the show. And we're, of course, joined by France 24 Europe editor Christophe Robit. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag F24debate. Before we turn to the rest of our panel and look more closely at what Marine Le Pen had to say in Brussels, let me ask you a question, Christophe Robit. Do you get the sense that Brussels is a different place today?
Well, in terms of PR, of course, this press conference was great stuff for Marine Le Pen. She was surrounded by 4 other parties, 4 Eurosceptic parties, not least the flamboyant Geert Wilders from the anti-Islam Freedom Party. There was also the leader of the Vlaams Belang. This is a Flemish right-wing party. The Northern League, very interesting, because the Northern League used to be in another group with Nigel Farage. I'm sure we're going to talk about the divisions among Eurosceptics themselves, and there was also the FPÖ from Austria. Brussels may be another city. Having said that, there was also the counter-reaction. There was a very large demonstration here in Brussels, mostly young people who don't seem to agree with the ideas of the National Front. 5 parties, you know the rule in Brussels. You need in total 7 different nationalities. There are still 2 countries missing, but the 5 leaders looked pretty confident. They have until the 24th of June to come up with 2 more allies.
All right, Marine Le Pen, again, as you say, Christophe, saying that she was confident. She addressed that packed press conference in Brussels a short while ago.
We've just come out of a meeting together, and I can say that we have no worries about the upcoming creation of our group. As you know, these groups have to be formed before the first parliamentary session, which will take place at the beginning of July. The very existence of our group will be proof in itself that a respectuous, neighbourly Europe of sovereign states can and should exist, and that the current model of the technocratic, totalitarian European Union is completely outdated.
Bruno Gollnisch, before I ask you about the voting bloc, what does she mean when she says the European Union is totalitarian?
Well, I think the European Union is piling regulations about nearly everything, so-called directive, new laws, and at the same time, or by the way, opening the European space to the competition with countries who have absolutely not the same kind of regulations, and there is a kind of a new, how would I say, messianism in the European Union. The mainstream, they are not. They do not act in favor of legitimate European countries' interests, but rather as a kind of a Euro-globalistic project. They are trying to rule every political, economical, cultural, I would say even sexual aspect of the lives of 500,000 million Europeans. And that is absolutely contrary to the true European genius. The legacy of European civilization is the freedom and the equality of nations.
Philippe Lamberts, do you feel as though Brussels is trying to take over your life?
Not really. First, I find it a bit odd to hear Bruno Gollnisch complaining that Europe is becoming totalitarian when I hear his boss, Marine Le Pen, embracing Vladimir Putin as someone you can do business with. I think that today's Russia is much closer to being totalitarian than Europe is. That said, we have to recognize that there is a widening democratic deficit in Europe. That is, that major decisions in terms of economic and social policy are being taken, well, in a sort of huis clos between the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and member state governments, without all of them being accountable for those decisions to their national parliaments or to the European Parliament. So we have to resolve this democratic deficit. That said, arguing that Europeans will be able to solve the challenges of the 21st century separately, I mean, country by country, or even when I look at the composition of maybe what may become the political group of Ms. Le Pen, region by region, is a lie. It's a lie. Just look at the energy transition. If we want to make Europe energy independent, well, that's beyond the reach of any single country taken apart, whereas together we can really achieve that goal. So our point is that if it's about sovereignty, that is, if it's about the ability for peoples to decide about their future, the only way for the Europeans, who represent today 7% of the global population, to reconquer their sovereignty is by pooling it rather than by splitting it, because then who wins other than the financial markets?
Bruno Gollnisch, I've been wanting to ask you, you're two parties shy of a voting bloc. Where are you going to find those two parties?
Oh, I think there will be maybe Baltic states or northern states, or so maybe people elected from Central or Eastern Europe. I think there won't be much problem about that. But if I may answer to Mr. Lambert, well, about Putin, we are not 100%. We do not agree 100% with Mr. Putin. But I think we did not hear the green when it was the Soviet Union of Mr. Andropov. Nor even before. About the energy policy, but Mr. Lambert should know that there is absolutely no consensus about energy policy. You know, for example, European Union is a mixture of the former community of iron and also the community for the nuclear energy. And the nuclear energy is now Mrs. Merkel said that she doesn't want, because of the green, by the way, she doesn't want any nuclear energy anymore, but still wanted to buy electricity originated from nuclear energy from France. So I don't see any real prospect for European cooperation in this field. Anything else than selling and buying, sad to say.
All right. The definite disagreement there between our two panelists in Brussels. A lot of reactions already coming in from you on Twitter. Lokesh saying people are not interested in the European elections. The majority of people did not vote. It's time to reform this union rather than dissolve it. I gotta say, Mathieu Douaret, there is this sense when you speak to most people, even those among those who did go to vote, that what they were voting for, since a lot of the power rests with the European Commission, was more like a model UN than actual voting for a body that has a lot of power.
Yeah, of course, and it's not at all new. It's been ages since we are contemplating the failure of the construction of political Europe on a democratic basis. There is general consensus on this topic. I think what's new is that people are increasingly aware of the deep disagreements and dissensus between the governments of the major countries that make up Europe. And that probably fuels Euroscepticism, because they see that between the UK, Germany, France, the new members from Eastern and Central Europe, there are so many disagreements and misunderstandings that it is almost impossible to move forward anymore. And I think that the public opinion is now very much aware of that, and there is no reason why they should be optimistic in the short run.
No reason to be optimistic, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet?
Very little reasons to be optimistic, really, because these elections really reflect the state of our country, but of many countries in Europe, where you have two kinds of people. You have people quite young and wealthy who benefit from globalization and who obviously love Europe and want to vote for it. And the rest of the country, maybe 60 to 70%, who are living really in a serious economic condition with very little income, less and less income. And they are not in this globalization trend. They are not benefiting from it. They are fearing it for their house, their mortgages, their revenues. And they are voting against Europe, or they are not voting for it, at least. And they are more and more inclined to vote for Marine Le Pen, because Marine Le Pen talks to them and offers an alternative. And any kind of alternative is good for them, because there is no other political discussion about Europe than the one that Marine Le Pen has, actually.
One of the comments, by the way, we got on Facebook from Peter, the National Front addressed the voter directly on European issues affecting France.
Yes.
All the others waffled about taxes, jobs, and trees. Philippe Lamberts, your party, the Greens, with a voting bloc that will be slightly smaller come the next European Parliament. Do you take the point from our viewer there?
Well, there's several things that need to be said. Yes, it's true that the way Europe has been acting the last few years is basically putting people in competition with one another, and that benefits only very few people in society. So I fully understand the anger of a majority of our population saying, well, this is not the Europe we wanted. It's a Europe that basically should defend people, should promote the well-being of people, and the impression that people are getting, not totally unfounded, is that indeed this is not working to their advantage. So indeed we need a drastic change, of course, in Europe. Yet I can tell you that we did campaign on the major issues for Europe. And basically we see Europe not, the European integration, not as an end in itself, but as a tool to achieve an end. And indeed, well, the tool is currently being used for an end that we do not share, but if we can make it work for energy independence, for more solidarity, for more equality, look at all the work that Thomas Piketty has been doing in France about inequalities, well, we believe that Europe can be an instrument to reduce inequality, to increase energy independence, well, basically to tackle the social and environmental issues of this century, and that basically, well, member states taken separately won't be successful doing that. So that's the point that we've tried to articulate during the campaign. And I would argue, I would agree that it was with limited success. We carried out a more successful campaign 5 years ago. Yet what I do see is that, well, losses in countries such as France or Germany are somewhat compensated by wins in the UK, in Sweden, in Austria, where we have progress, or in Hungary, even in Hungary, where we carried out a really European campaign, well, we are starting to make progress in those countries. So I take, well, I understand that it's sometimes hard to be optimistic these days, but I see mixed signs, and we have to work on the positive signs to improve the situation.
All right, lots of reactions again, as we say on Facebook. Gur saying, disaffected general population, disillusioned and ignored working class, so-called socialists in power are authors of a massive disconnect. While on Twitter, Richard says, unemployment may well explain a large part of the popularity of Marine Le Pen and her Front National. Unfortunately, says Richard. By the way, we were talking a little bit earlier about that press conference by Marine Le Pen. Eurosceptics, a rather motley crew when you look at the map of Europe. The French newspaper Le Monde talked about a Europhobe mosaic when it drew the map of countries that are bringing in Eurosceptics from either in the case of UKIP, which will not be a part of Marine Le Pen's coalition there with 24 seats in Britain. But there you see the lion's share in France on 24 seats. And the countries in red on more than 22% of the vote going to those parties. Christophe Robic, let me ask you, when you were at that press conference earlier, did you get the sense that Marine Le Pen and the leaders of the parties she was sitting next to were singing from the same hymn sheet?
Well, it was clear that she was in a dominant position, not least because she won 24 seats in the European Parliament. That's 25% of the vote in France, which is not exactly the case of Geert Wilders. The polls had predicted that the Dutch anti-Islam leader would be doing better than he actually ended up doing. On certain issues, yes, they look very united. They are anti-immigration. They regard Brussels, Europe as a sort of monsters that they have to dismantle. But then when you look at more subtle issues, you will realize that they are actually quite different. I'll take two examples, Geert Wilders and Marine Le Pen. Now, Geert Wilders, he stems from the Dutch liberals. So in terms of the economy, he's extremely liberal, very pro-market. And on social issues, he's very pro-gay rights. He actually once said that gay marriage is part of Dutch values. Compare this with Marine Le Pen, who is very much in favor of protectionist measures against France's competitors in what she perceived as an ultra-globalized world. On gay issues, we know that she's extremely conservative. I think when it will come down to specific issues, their unity will be tested. But of course, when it comes to Europe and immigration, yes, they looked at least united on this front. I mentioned Nigel Farage earlier. It's interesting that I can see a rising competition between these two possible political groups. Unlike Marine Le Pen, Nigel Farage used to have a political group in the previous parliament. And of course, he wants to keep this group. Well, he's already lost the Italian Northern League, which has now sided with Marine Le Pen. He's hoping to gain other parties.
He's hoping
to gain.
As we heard earlier, and we'll get the reaction.
Beppe Grillo from Italy.
We'll get the reaction of Bruno Gollnisch to your remarks when we come back. We're going to have to take a quick break. Stay with us. It's the France 24 debate.